So I'm going to do my job of asking all the difficult questions, but if the word difficult is, the definition is different between what I ask and versus what you think, I want you guys to help me out towards the end of our interview today. So my first question is much broader. But before I ask my question, I wanted to get a sense of what this audience is looking for and what backgrounds people have. So how many people are currently working in data management? Okay. And how many people are interested in headed in that direction, like want to be part of data management? Okay. So I guess everybody else does other things. Okay. So, all right, good. So my first question is, I think it's just a broad question. What is data management and what does the life of a data manager look like? So Karen, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that those are two pretty broad questions, right? But data management is on.
I think your mics need to get turned on.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, kind of very broad questions, but that's a question I get asked a lot when I tell people. Actually, to the point I don't even say I'm a data manager. I say I work in clinical research, and people don't ask any more questions. But data management is really the overview and collection of data for clinical trials, at least from the clinical trials parts. There's data management for banking and lots of other industries, but in clinical trials, it's planning for the collection of data, collecting the data, and then once you receive the data, cleaning the data, ensuring it's an accurate representation of the patients that you have on studies. That's a very broad general.
Yeah.
The life of a data manager, my life is meetings and looking at a computer screen. So
Yeah. And Gina, what do you think?
Let me read you the definition that I kind of collected through the years, and when I'm asked, I just open my cell phone and read. The data management is a, does it work?
I think you're on. Yeah.
Data management is a part of clinical organization that creates, maintains, and presents through use of technology quality clinical data that supports an accurate and timely statistical analysis. It adheres to all the applicable standards and regulations and laws of quality and truthfulness in scientific research.
So that's great. Thank you for. It was good to have two different perspectives and much rigorous definition from Gina and kind of understanding what. Yeah, I think that helps give some perspective. So what does the life of a data manager look like? Like, just let's assume somebody who's in their second year of doing data management work. How would they start their day, and what would happen along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it really depends on where you are in your career. Someone who's just starting out, it's a much different day than someone who's maybe been through a few places like I have. But even in a small company, it hasn't changed too much. A typical day for maybe a beginning or entry-level data manager is doing a lot of cleaning of data. An entry-level person is generally going to be brought in a support role to help out when a study has already been built and is already collecting data. And once those of you in data management and those of you who are in the ClinOps side or SAS programming side, you know that once data starts coming in, it's not perfect. It's very far from perfect. So you need cleaning, you have queries. So an entry-level person may be responsible for looking at data queries, looking at data listings and adding queries into an EDC system, and seeing how a site might respond to a query to see if they can resolve that issue. So, a lot of time at the computer or looking at listings. Someone who's moved on in their career is maybe starting to plan for studies. They're part of the study startup process, designing case report forms, doing some initiative and process planning to make things easier for sites to collect data. And I think it progresses from there. Do you know what you think?
I totally agree. I just would like to add that there are specific type of people and specific skills that comprise data management. It could be a little lonely job at times when you actually are looking at data. What is data? Sometimes it's spreadsheets, sometimes it is reports. So you would need to be very focused, very detail oriented, and understand what to look for, because you need to understand the meaning of what you are looking for. What does this data mean? And out of that, again, if it's probably not when you're a beginner, but maybe mid-level or senior, what are the issues with the study you see? What are the issues with the site that you see? And how to communicate those issues so that things are adjusted and done right. So you truly see one of the first people, probably, you see the trends, you see the successes, you see the issues with your study, and you need to be able to communicate. Great communicator, even though it is a lonely job, is extremely important in our position. You need to speak right, you need to be able to know how to create those queries so site is not screaming murder. You know, it is a written communication, so the written ways are very important, how you communicate. Sites, doctors, your project management. So it is a difficult role, or maybe interesting role.
Yeah. So that kind of segues well into my next question is, I think at the end of the day, sponsors and CROs are serving their customers, that is the clinical trial sites, like you said. They have to communicate, data managers are expected to communicate effectively. So what specifically do you think data managers could do better to serve clinical trial sites?
What can we do better? I think we need to raise proper data managers. There have to be seniors and leaders who raise people who are navigating well in this complex environment. Because again, to look for queries, to write queries, you need to learn, but you can. But all that communication with this complex project, that's probably what I am hoping to do. I'm doing with my team. I'm having constant trainings and conversations, on how to communicate. And another thing, working on project management skills, which are, in my opinion, extremely important.
That actually took me by surprise. We just had dinner on Monday, and Gina and Haj were telling me about how project management skills are so essential to being a data manager. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know there was this thing about being a project manager for data management, but apparently there is that need for those kind of individuals. Kim, what are your thoughts on what could we do better to serve our sites as data managers?
So I think project management, a lot of places you call it data management project manager, the DMPM is a really key role, whether it's really a defined role or just part of what the data manager does. And that is, our customers really are the ClinOps, the programmers, and the site. And somehow we're in the middle, we have to make all those people happy. So I think that's the challenge. You can make your SaaS programmers really happy and really annoy your sites. You can make your sites really happy and really annoy your SaaS programmers, and ClinOps in the middle there is also an oversight. So, but I really find it's most important you make everybody happy if you can start with your sites. Because you make them happy, they enter the data accurately. Now the challenge is getting that done, which there's never a perfect world, but I think taking a step back to be very practical about what you're doing. I think that's what served me well in my career. I think anyone who knows me knows I'm like just a regular, practical, whatever, keep it simple kind of person. Don't overcomplicate anything. So asking questions and very straightforward. You don't want to treat the sites like they're dumb. They're very intelligent, highly active people. They're busy with patients. You just have to make things obvious for them. Sure. So ask questions in a straightforward way. When you query data, query in a very straightforward way. Make sure the site knows the problem and the possible solutions. I had a lesson just last week at my company about how to query appropriately. Don't say this is wrong. What does that mean? You don't know. Don't say correct this, change it, delete an AE. That's not a good advice either. So being very straightforward with instructions, make it obvious, good, communication again, to go back to that. It doesn't have to be over communicate. You don't want a lot of words there to, vary the query requests, but have it very straightforward. The sites are really busy. The last thing they want to do is enter data or respond to queries. So the easier you can make it for them, I think the more success you have as a company collecting data.
And if I can just lighten this
Please.
conversation, there is, when you are a data manager for a long time, you have a very interesting, you have many interesting stories and answers to queries from the sites. One of my favorites is, I'm not gonna think about it today, I'll think about it tomorrow. Direct quote.
Yeah, they respond in all capitals, you're in trouble, so you want to avoid that sort of thing.
They're all PG-13 comments, right?
Yeah.
So the next question I have is, can you share with us the number one problem people are facing today when it comes to data management in the 21st century?
Number one problem? I think we're always really playing catch up with technology. Yeah, I think, the Medrio solution of why do we have to take source documents? The site enters the data, and then why do we have to make them enter it again and then query it? I think that's probably, if we can figure out a solution to that, it makes everyone's life simpler. So I think that would be a great way. Why make people enter data and then we have to query it? Good for business, keeps me employed, keeps all of us employed in some way. But I think that's probably maybe the number one solution for the future.
I'll answer from another side. I work a lot with the startups that know that they need data management, but don't really know what they do and why. So probably education and working with them so they see your value. That's number one thing for we're often in the background doing our little thing.
So being able to show value, proactively show value that as a data manager.
Right, and not being considered as, why are we taking so long?
Yeah.
Not a hindrance to the progress, but actually part of it.
I see. So the data thing, the comment you made, I was wondering, why do you think that's happening with the challenge that you, is there a solution that you have in mind?
No, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of people working on a solution.
Okay.
But I think, I date myself a bit, but I worked long ago when EDC was coming up and people were like, oh, that will never fly. We can't have sites entering data. They'll never want to enter data. Yet we have them entering data now. But that was, so there's changes a lot. I think, and then with EDC, when it came in too, there were people that didn't think regulatory agencies would allow it or accept it. So I think as a regulated industry, we're afraid to do something different because we don't want the FDA to not accept our data. That would be bad.
Right. I would agree. The reason why we're a bit behind is due to the regulatory oversight, and we are going slow, and we're waiting for FDA to make decisions and make guidances for us, and for this technology to kind of settle, so we know how to answer to those regulations, to those general regulations.
And FDA probably wants the industry to figure it out and come up with proposals.
Well, that's mine.
Right. So let's assume that there's a startup with 1 or 2 clinical trials that are in their pipeline. They've never done data management, and they have a very small team. Maybe they have like 1 or 2 people in clinical, and it's the first time they're setting up an EDC system. What would their system/supplier selection process look like?
Well,
And the more details you can give, I think that'd be helpful for.
well, the details is probably very long. It will
Okay.
take a little while
Can
for
she
them
turn
to
on her
select,
mic?
but
We need
I
to
like
hear
to
her.
start.
Oh,
Can you turn on her mic?
You didn't put
Oh, closer.
Yeah, it's,
Does it work now?
Yeah,
Yes.
now we can hear you.
Yeah, the selection is going to be for a little while, maybe a month or so. It depends how fast they want to move. But first of all, I would ask them to create a questionnaire of looking inside what exactly are my trials and what do I need? What are the features that I need? What is the company that I need to be associated with? I mean, the company that has been in business for a while, or the new company that promises the moon, and I'm ready to, to experiment. But probably most, and of course, cost is very important too. So, what is my budget? So I would start with a questionnaire. First of all, what features do I have? What I often see, especially with startups, they are looking at very large EDC companies that have all the bells and whistles and above and beyond, and they are becoming very little person in this pool of huge companies in support they're getting is not exactly what they need. So there are again several things to look for. Who am I for this company? And of course, how long this company has been in business is important too. I'd like to a well-developed and mature system, even for my 1 or 2 little trials. And then scalability, what is next for me? I hope to accomplish, do I need safety system that is big? Do I need, the laboratory management system that do I need to connect with CTMSs of the world? Depends what you need. You start with your requirements. That's my point.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. One of the things I see most, I've been at a number of small companies where I've started as the first person in the data management department and grown. So that's been my life probably the last 5 or 6 years of companies that size. The challenge I've had at most of them is that they bring someone in with data management experience after they already have those first 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 studies up and running, and they're having problems. So they haven't planned for what they're going to do. I think the typical MO of a company that size with a couple people in ClinOps, they select a CRO for their ClinOps portion, and data management is kind of an aftersight. It just comes along with the ClinOps CRO. So they don't really do due diligence on each functional area. That person comes from a ClinOps background, so they kind of naturally do due diligence on the ClinOps part of it. But if they haven't planned and done all the things that Gina has suggested they do, they may run into problems when it comes to an interim analysis or final cleanup, when they have maybe a data management EDC system or a data management vendor who is not performing. And they may not be performing as well because they didn't have anyone really performing data management oversight.
So is it better to hire like a consultant that during those earlier phases rather than a full-time employee for data manager or as for data management?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the company.
Okay.
That's a challenge of a small company, is just having, an FTE approved, or maybe they don't even need a full-time person. They just
Exactly.
need a third of a person. So
Sure.
yeah, bringing in a consultant that knows how to set up and have oversight. But then, as Gina mentioned, planning for success. If you're a company that's starting up, are you planning to just have 1 or 2 studies in the next 2 to 3 years? I think most people who are starting a clinical trial are planning for success and planning another phase 1 or 2 study, and if that's successful, then moving onward. So you might not want to join with a system like an EDC system where you're going to move from a ClinOps vendor to a ClinOps vendor. You may want to take a little bit more of a future planning for standards by selecting one vendor, even if a ClinOps or the CRO is the one that's working with that system. You still may want to have your own system in-house for for future standards.
This is a very, very good point. I actually have a client right now exactly like that. And we are discussing the fact that they will have more studies, and the next study is going to be built faster, because in a tiny companies, the next study and the next study is usually quite similar. You know, it's not a huge organization that has many products. So that's something to think about.
Sure. So what are one or two pitfalls that the startup should be watching out for?
I think planning for standards, planning for that. Don't plan to each study use a different EDC vendor. Plan on doing your due diligence upfront to select a single EDC vendor or provider. I think that helps to have your progressive, your next successive study to be faster. I think some of the pitfalls I've seen for small companies are a lack of using standards, a lack of having them yet because they're so small. But then I don't want to say lack of planning, but changing your mind very often.
Is it the next shiny object syndrome?
A little bit of that, but as a small company that's growing, you bring more people on board and hopefully highly intelligent, really gung-ho people who have great ideas. And then, new great ideas are. So that is something that I think as a data manager, because I like stability and nice little boxes and everything. But that's, trying to be flexible enough to plan for the changes that are coming up. Our company, we call our protocols flexible because there's some gray area about what we might do next. And it's all okay from a regulatory agency and IRB approvals and all that, but we might go to different dosing schemes. An EDC system that has every week dosing or twice a week dosing or every third week dosing, you can't plan for that up front. So, being able to move quickly, you need some people who have experience to do that.
Along those lines, but just a little different, on a different topic. When bring data management specialist and expert early, that's actually one of my points always, because at the time the protocol is created, at the time the protocol is being read by data management, we are planning the database build, we're planning the data collection, and we see and we choose through the protocol in the way like nobody else does. We find inconsistencies, we find changes that protocol must be incorporated into. So it's very critical to have our set of eyes on the protocol very early.
Yeah, actually, that's, I think, a great point. And anyone here who's a medical writer or from the ClinOps side or the medical monitors, when a protocol gets handed off to data management, we have to turn it into an EDC system. The only way we can do that is if the schedule assessments make sense and there's not major inconsistencies between the checkboxes and the footnotes and the body of a protocol. Nothing worse than finding it the day after the protocol has been approved. So if you have a data manager, someone who's really, I think most data managers are very detail oriented. We're looking for the needle in the haystack. If you let the
We're going to cross-reference your protocol to
yeah.
So maybe the advice is make sure that there's a signature field in the DOT that says the data manager needs to sign off on the protocol.
Yeah.
We don't always need to sign off, but we need to review. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's really part of
The review, yeah.
part of the QC review. When data management looks at it.
So my next question was, what are the top 3 factors that affect EDC development timelines, and how can sponsors, what steps can they take to accelerate those timelines?
Bring in data manager early. I can say it again and again, right? Then again, in our heads, we will be building the database before the database is being built. Bring in somebody who can manage the timelines, because we can create a proper project plan for the build and will be on time with your first patient in or whatever timelines are. That's my two.
Yeah, I think that's really important. If the data management group, whoever you have doing it, even if it's your functional provider, if they're not given the protocol until after it's final, you're not going to get a database built in, 4 to 6 weeks after your protocol is final. You can really only hit that if there's planning up front. So someone has a look at the drafts of the protocol, they're planning for what needs to get done. There may be changes in what you're going to do for scheduled assessments or what visit time points, but the bulk of the data you're going to collect is pretty well set when you start writing a protocol. You know what sort of assessments you're going to do. You know what sort of efficacy data you're looking at. Safety is a given. So those are standard things that you can know about in the early drafts of your protocol when you're still fine-tuning a lot of the details. So I think early involvement, and I think to go back to the project management side of data management, it's really important to have someone strong who can kind of drive that process and have oversight of your vendors. If it's the EDC provider doing a build or any other functional service provider doing an EDC build, any service provider that you hire for any functional group, you need to poke them and make sure they're doing it and let them know you expect something on Friday, and on Friday, let them know you're expecting it that day. And if they didn't deliver, that's a problem. But if it's radio silence from the sponsor side, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So they're going to work on the one that's poking them and being the squeaky wheel.
Sure. Okay. And then what steps? So when I started Abbott, I know there was this big backlog of just data that wasn't clean, and I think we get back on track, but then things again fall behind schedule, and there's this humongous data. There's staff turnover, and there's this backlog. So what steps can a sponsor or a CRO take to accelerate their data cleaning process? Like what has worked for you? Can you share some ideas?
Sure. I think it again goes to the project management side of data management. Having a data review plan, and data review is actually not just a data management task. We can tell if data is inconsistent from one thing to another, but from a medical point of view, are those AEs and those medications appropriate? From a safety point of view, is that AE some major safety concern? Or, from the stats point of view, the site entered data the way it made sense, but it's going to blow up the TLFs when they're starting to program things. So combining all of the functional groups into a data review plan is something that we have. We generally try to have it as part of our data management plan. It's an appendix or it's a separate document depending on your organization. But it clearly defines who's going to look at what data. Because you can't just say review the AEs. The data manager is going to look at it and make sure start and stop dates make sense and things like that. But a medical monitor is going to look at it by the fact that they just said they had a fatal stubbed toe. That's probably something more complicated. Data manager can figure that out. But something that an adverse event that they say is either mild and it can never be mild, or it's a fatal event that's really not a serious event. So making sure the functional groups that have the expertise to look at the data are going to do it, plan for it, what frequency. Different organizations have different frequency, once a month, once a quarter, once patients hit a certain time point. But I think plan for that up front.
So I just have a couple follow-up questions. What does TLF stand for those?
Oh, sorry. Trying not to use too many acronyms. Your table listings and figures.
Okay. And then in terms of, you said communicating with safety or safety owning their piece of the data review, for example. Who kind of owns that? Like, who takes the lead? Do you expect safety to come to you, or do you go to safety?
It really depends how strong your data. It really depends how strong your data manager PM is. Quite often, I have seen that they take a lead on everything data, on all the vendors, IWRS, design, and for example, and QC and UAT, and checking the data that comes in time after time, because I've seen a lot of, let's say, duplicates coming in through and cleaning that. So it really depends on the strength of the PM skills of the data management. Now you have asked what do you do when you come into my very favorite term is rescue studies, when you're called to rescue the study. Besides creating a plan, sometimes you cannot, if it is such a huge study, 1,000 patients, couple of thousand patients, you cannot rescue every data point. So you sit down with the clinical team and all the organization and figure out what exactly are you going to clean, what are the points that you are going to clean, and then you start establishing a relationship with the sites and the people again, because quite often it is such a forgotten study that nobody looked at it for a little while. So another role of yours, after you truly define what you're going to clean field by field, what is important for this study? If not everything, then what? And it is a plan. Then you start establishing relationship with the site again. You say hello, and we're working on this study again, and I'm here again, and I'm supporting you, and this time I'm good. So that's that is the plan. You reestablish relationship actually with the whole team. That is that's a communication part,
Yep.
PM part again. That is those soft skills that are very critical for data management.
Yeah, that's great. So I think talking about soft skills, and maybe this is good. I'm curious, like, what resources do you keep yourself going back to over and over again? Specifically looking for insights that will make somebody great at data management.
That's a good question. I'd have my whole history of my own favorites for templates and how to design forms. And one of my challenges as someone who's been in this industry a while and wants to support the future of data management is figuring out how to get someone into data management. I don't have a good answer. I can tell you the last 10 or 12 years, I've never hired someone without experience. How do they get experience? It's really hard. I mean, one of my answers is CROs need a lot of people and they're more willing to train. So I think starting off there is a spot where you can, you're exposed to a lot of different type of studies. You're exposed to a lot of different sponsors, so a lot of different ways of doing things. But as the companies I've been at have been small startups, and anyone who comes in needs to hit the ground running, but I don't know how you learn how to hit the ground running without having 5 years experience or something like that. I think that's
So if there's people in the audience that have not worked in data management and want to get into the field, are you saying that they need to start at the CRO?
Not necessarily.
I mean, how can they learn? And I mean,
they kind of fall into data management. That's kind of my experience, and then they like it. It's an analytical skills, it's focus skills. It's very close to technology. At least I came from the technology switch.
that's a good point.
So that's the path. You kind of look and fall into it.
Yeah, I think not just CROs, I shouldn't say, but some of the larger companies too. Are more able to train and mentor someone right off of the bat. Or if you have people within your organization who are in different functional areas, bringing them in and exposing them if they're interested. I mean, I think a good organization will want to keep good people. So if they're interested in other functional areas, that's another way as well.
Yeah, there are certifications for already experienced people, but there is no college degree in data management.
So you guys both mentioned about soft skills. Is there a specific resource that you recommend for soft skills?
Project management course. There is SCDM site that is very helpful. For me, since I've been in business for a while, it's all the people I know. Through the years, I keep in touch with them. They are my support. They are working with me and advising me when I need to.
Just to cover the acronym, SCDM is a Society of Clinical Data Management. That's actually a really good resource for people to understand what data management is about. It's a professional organization, and they have training classes and the DIA, Drug Information Association.
Yeah.
They also have conferences and seminars and trainings as well for anyone who, DIA is a cross industry.
And many extension colleges like Berkeley and UC of Santa Cruz now have, or for a while had, courses in data management, but it's not a separate course. It's part of clinical research certification.
So I have one last question, then we'll open it up for questions. So what does the future look like for data management? What opportunities lie ahead of us?
It is so exciting. It is wonderful. We are, as data managers, very technical. I'd like to emphasize it once again. So all the technology with wearables, with AEs, the artificial intelligence, with EHR coming here with the patient, with direct input from the patients, all kinds of devices that you can think of. We collect data and get introduced to and interface with. So from the technology perspective, it is awesome area to be in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think those are all the sources of how we're collecting the data that are really exciting, and how we can move forward with it in the future. But for me personally, I think to go back to Haja's point earlier, that when I hear about one of the drugs that I've worked on getting approval, that means that we're helping people. And I think that's a really powerful thing. I think that's why almost anyone who's in clinical trials, or probably everyone, got into it in the first place. You have a little bit of scientific angle. I like the science part, and then I'm technical, so I do data management. But to be involved in a drug that ultimately gets approval, and that's the goal.
Do you think the role of the data manager will evolve with the technological advances? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, over my career, there's been the evolution of, we used to have a room full of people doing heads down data entry. It was just, pounding away and entering data, and that's not happening anymore. I think that's a benefit to the career, because it's just more interesting. Doing heads down data entry is not very fun, but looking at the troubleshooting, putting the puzzle together for how we're going to collect data, to me, that's much more interesting. So I think as a day-to-day job, you've taken out the maybe menial tasks that are not very interesting and kind of raise the level.
Technology, data analytics, artificial intelligence is in our future. But you also need to truly be analytical yourself and have inclination to look and analyze and see data trends.
Cool. So we'll open up for questions. No, you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, I was going to ask you about tools.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Mark Gant. I'm CEO of a software company that's looking really at software in the space and so forth. So I was actually going to ask you a question about tools, SQL, cleaning, so what, do you have raw access? I'm new to the industry, so please bear with me in terms of when you say the words cleaning and so forth. Are you comfortable with your toolkit? And if so, or if not, why, or what would you do otherwise? In other words, are you just straight querying the source data, or do you have interfaces that you use to interact with and analyze and understand?
We have EDC that we use as a tool, for example, to query data. Yeah.
So like Tableau, you understand what I'm asking? No.
Visualization software.
Yeah, the Tableau is one way of doing the visualization and seeing where there's problems. I think most of us, when we're looking at data, are looking either at listings, Excel spreadsheets, other ways to present either the raw data as or long lines of listings, or SAS is a programming language, right?
I know.
That we can do a lot, have our programmers pull out things that are known possible inconsistencies. So they can give us a list of problems. We don't have to go searching through it. But then EDC is where we would query back to the site and say, the stop date is before the start date. So fix one of them.
The reason I'm sorry to ask this question is because a couple meetings ago, they were talking about how they've changed, the FDA is comfortable now with sampling as opposed to when you go back and verify the source of data, you don't have to now go back to every single record.
Right.
So I guess my question is sort of moving into that model, how does that affect your need for tools and what you just described and so forth? Is kind of where I was going, I'm sorry.
Risk-based monitoring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Risk-based monitoring, which needs its own set of tools.
Right.
You can't just decide today, these are the data points we want to monitor. There has to be some sort of plan and risk-based rationale for what you're going to look like. And if you hit a certain bar, like a bad bar, you have to look at more. If, the first patient at a site, you look at more than the 5th or 6th or 10th patient at the site. So there's tools and modules you add on to EDC systems or CTMS systems.
I heard about the tool that allows you through some algorithm to check which fields are to be monitored. So I have not seen implementation yet, but there are some coming.
Is there another question right there?
I'm sorry, I'm not something down behind me.
It's empty.
Okay.
The bottle's empty.
So from a sponsor perspective, when is it the right time to change from a sponsor-owned / study-owned EDC to a CR-owned? I'm reading my question here. Let me reread it. So from a sponsor perspective, when is it the right time to change from a CRO-owned study-based EDC to a sponsor-owned study-based EDC? And what resources are needed from a sponsor when you make that transition?
That's an interesting question.
That's reverse.
Well, just from the experience, I have seen that sponsors like to own data. So when is the right time? I don't know. It really depends on a sponsor when they want to. But if it is one sponsor, it can choose a proper system, build many studies in that system, and cross-analyze studies using that same standards and system. So maybe after when sponsor has grown from little one to little bigger one, that question will arise. What does the sponsor need? Well, they need a full-blown data management department with programmers who can build and support the study. And they will have help desks. So it is not a simple transition. You need to think through when you need to build a new department.
Thank you.
I would say as early as possible. And the company I'm currently at was amazing. That they brought me in and said, how do you want to do data management? And I told them how I wanted to do it. I wanted to own our data. I think part of it though, you can't do that without considering the consequences. You can't have a group that just does this, that they don't exist if you don't have data management experience. So one of the key parts is planning for who's going to do the build. You're not going to have a small company's not going to have a pool of programmers. So you do have to have functional providers and how you're going to delegate responsibility if you're going to follow that service provider's SOPs. Right? So you can be a very small company and still own your system, but have qualified personnel working on it and being responsible for the validation, UAT, and tests like that.
Thank you.
Way in the back.
I just wanted to add to have a biostatistician and/or statistician as well. That
Thank
to
you.
me is key.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And very early as well.
Yeah.
Front seat, right?
have a question.
Oh.
I'm Sunya and I'm would answer there. So as we introduce more digital technologies or wearables to trials, what kind of challenges do you see for data management perspective? I mean, you collect more data.
I recently had a study with wearables, and the challenges are the same as with any data transmission or data input. Data may or may not be very clean. That's that's the main challenge.
I think to add to that, understanding the limitations. If it's, fitness tracker, and I just get a lot of steps. What is the validity of the data you're collecting? Is it true, accurate data?
Well, that's actually a very interesting point. I just wanted to add here that with time, we'll have more and more data sources, and figuring out what you actually need out of that. And it's not necessarily everything you need is another challenge for our profession eventually.
Right here, do you have a question? Go for it.
I do. I actually have a loud voice too, so
Yeah, go for it.
I might be okay. Oh, okay.
We only have 4 more minutes left. I'd like
Okay,
to
so
get as
really
many
quick,
questions as possible.
my name is Deborah. I am a project manager, and I've actually been in this role for a lot of years, not aging myself here. My question for you is, I hear data management is very detail oriented. You must be analytical. As a project manager, generally project manager, very high level. They're task oriented. That's how they're built. Do you find that you're finding project managers that are analytical that can support your team? Because in my experience, I've not seen it. I usually hire a business analyst or someone that is very detail oriented. Just wondering.
I think it's a challenge. I mean, every person you hire has, their strengths and weaknesses. So you may have someone who's really good on the project management side, but maybe not as good in the details, or vice versa. So it's just about trying to figure out that fine line. I think that the people in data management who advance and excel are people who can balance both of those.
Okay, thank you.
I usually prefer to see the path for these people. They are data managers that go into project management.
Yeah.
So they have all these basic skills and understand what tasks are and what it takes to get the tasks, because hopefully they have done some of them.
Yes.
But then they can have strategic view as well, which is project management.
Yeah.
These are the best.
Thank you.
One last question.
Earlier you said what makes a good data manager, and I was a CRA for 20 years, and now I'm in quality for the past 10, so I kind of date myself. But I remember reading queries that if I were to say what makes a good query, that it's clear and concise, it doesn't sound punitive, and that it gets results. So as you start with new data managers, if you read their queries, if those 3 things, it's clear and concise, it doesn't sound punitive, it sounds more like, can you help me understand? Like, this is this and this is this, please clarify. That's a way of, please help me understand. And that'll get you results. I would read some queries, and no wonder the study coordinator would say, I'll deal with this tomorrow, because it didn't make sense, and it hurt them, and it added to their burden of their day. So the soft skills are important. I thought of that early when we were talking, that soft skills are so important. And everybody on the planet responds to a message that has the underlying tone of, please help me. And if you have that thread in anything you ask of anyone, please help me, it gets better results than a punitive kind of thing. So anyways, that's my thought.
So I just want
This is awesome addition, actually. And when I train data managers, when I am in a position of training them, I actually spent a lot of time on wording of those queries and messages. You're absolutely right. It's very important, and people could be on the other side of the world thinking in a totally different way. So you need to consider that.
Anything else? I think I'm seeing a red piece of paper in the back, so I think we're gonna call this a wrap. We'll be around for a bit more to talk questions. But thank you for your time today.